Hey everyone. Yeah, it's really awesome event, and I have to say, GM, everyone GM, right? Yeah, as the title says, staking from retail to enterprise. So we're gonna talk about the hard stuff. So the nodes, the validators, the guys who keep the chains running, and who also have oftentimes a hard time to basically accommodate the adoption, which we as a blockchain space, I guess, widely experiencing. So I guess we'll start with a short round of introductions. So my name is Gleb Dudka. I'm senior analyst Greenfield One. That's a Berlin-based crypto VC. So we try to take on an active role in the networks. So run validators in-house, provide liquidity. So that's kind of my institutional investor hat. I also have an enterprise validator hat. In my previous job, I founded and led the staking unit of Deutsche Telekom, so the big kind of telco enterprise. And we ran public proof-of-stake blockchain validators, putting crypto on a balance sheet. So I guess kind of that enterprise hat a little bit.
Cool. My name is Ella. I'm a product manager at the Solana Foundation. I work on censorship resistance. I administer the delegation program, which helps new validators join the Solana blockchain, and also am the product manager for stake pools. So work pretty closely with the existing stake pools, also work pretty closely with a lot of the validators on the chain. And our mission is really let's increase decentralization, increase censorship resistance. So really excited to talk about more of that with really important ecosystem partners today.
Great. Hey, I'm Konstantin. I'm the CEO and founder of Blockdaemon. We're an institutional node operator and liquidity enabler. We try to make sure that when institutions participate in networks that get secured via tokens, that the nodes they operate are additive to the network resilience overall. So we operate 70 different data centers across 10 different cloud providers, and run hugely fault resistance and failover system-driven infrastructure for those institutions, so we can move nodes around and ensure that they don't cause any issues in the network.
I'm Daniel. I'm a protocol specialist at Stakefish. I do protocol research and governance.
OK, awesome. So I think we have a quite diversified background here at the panel. So we have the validators, the service companies, and kind of the foundation representative, and kind of enterprise background. So I think we can have look at the topic from different angles. But to start, I would like to come back a little bit and say, so let's look at it from demand angle, from supply side and the demand side angle, right? So on the supply side of every network, there are the nodes and the validators. And because the blockchains themselves are rather multi-dimensional and multidisciplinary, so the business model of a validator or a node operator is also pretty weird. So on the one hand, you are running a secure IT infrastructure, so you have that very hardware, cloud-driven infrastructure business model. On the other hand, you also ensuring that the stakers and delegates, basically, they're earning stake rewards. So you're kind of also providing there's a financial aspect to this. The governance topic is also very important. So you're also kind of representing your delegates in these networks. And there are also some other aspects of this business model. So I was just wondering, guys, which aspects of those business models you like, or how would you describe the business model of validator? And which of those multiple dimensions are closest to you? Why wouldn't you start, Daniel?
Sure, yeah, I think that's a really interesting question, because I think you kind of broke it down into sort of the fiduciary duties of a validator might have, and also the on-chain governance, where exposed on these specific POS chains that we do operate. I think perhaps the line or the boundaries between the two under validator service providers are still quite a bit blurry, and I'd be interested to hear all your other opinions. But I was actually on a panel a few weeks ago at Mainnet, and we were talking to some other validators, and I asked them, right, how do you as validators, where there is on-chain governance exposed, how are you communicating your governance to your delegators? And some validators actually don't, right? And they actually had mentioned maybe there should be a separation between kind of the agnostic infrastructure service or infrastructure management and the governance. So I think validators and validator service providers still have a ways to go to figure out kind of where they kind of fall. Maybe there are niches. Maybe there are more infrastructure management heavy validators that are going to focus on that do have like internal like great walls inside, and then there's validators that do have very specific governance related initiatives, right? At least at Stakefish, we do make very concerted attempts to communicate to our delegators and be able, right? We have like this concept of like validators are like clans or guilds, right? We have like the hashtag fishfam for Stakefish for who is in our community. But yeah.
Yeah, for us, we actually acquired a company earlier this year called Looney that was a multi-protocol staking wallet that enabled governance across multiple protocols also. So we think of it more as a tool we provide within our application, where we allow people who operate nodes with us to actually have an easy governance tool, but we do offer the service as well, where we will actually vote on their behalf, depending on how involved they want to be. I think you'd be actually surprised how a lot of people don't care that much that stake is actually the reality, and so we try to be responsible in educating them and to send them summaries of how these things, what they mean. Translating governance proposals into understandable language is actually something that's really important, because a lot of the more retail-centric investors aren't or don't have the time to really study the technical implications of complex implementations that get voted on. For us, from a business model perspective, we really like to bring what we learn from institutions to the wider community. So we try to participate in open source projects on all the networks we participate in, as well as making public API endpoints available that runs on high availability infrastructure, for example, which is something we've announced for Solana earlier today, where everyone can take advantage of an institutional grade failover system, uptime of 99.999% infrastructure. And we look on the commercial side really on the revenue share that we make with institutional stakers. And so that's why we also are interested in providing liquidity, because we feel that's the best way for us to plan our involvement in an open source community.
Okay, got it. And I guess then, Ella, for you, from looking from the demand side, right? So who are actually like the stakers, the people who are participating in Solana network? Like, I was wondering, what does the landscape of that look like? So is it like mostly institution-driven, like retail-driven? How does it look like?
Yeah, it's a mix. I mean, so 79% of SOL is staked, which means 79% of people who have SOL are interested in staking it, whether it's to individual validators or to stake pools. And I think it's fair to say there's a range of people in terms of how much they care about actively monitoring their SOL and how much they want to participate in the different projects, whether it's actually engaging with the stake pool or the validator, or even going a little bit further and trying to differentiate between the different lending protocols, the different the broad DeFi space. Maybe they want to pick winners. And so I think this question of like, if you have a governance token, whether it's on a validator or where maybe you have everyone who delegates to you, they get some share of your votes actually, if there's on-chain governance, and you almost have like a representative democracy in some sense, or whether you just trust the validator to kind of vote how based off of the values they've expressed in the past. I think that model is really interesting. Or on the other side, stake pools having governance tokens, what are you actually voting on is kind of a good question, right? And so I think something that is only really coming out now that we're seeing is your choice to stake on one stake pool or another is kind of your vote for which DeFi protocols you want to support, because different stake pools choose to integrate with different DeFi protocols, and maybe that's a values decision, maybe it's purely a rewards decision, but you really are helping to support the ecosystem. And so I think even without a governance token, you're already kind of voting with your feet when you choose to stake with one validator, one stake pool or another. So I think it's early. People are not always as maybe engaged as we want them to be, but I think it's kind of on us to educate them and tell them that it actually does matter where they stake, and it does matter that they do stake. the way that the protocol is designed is if you just hold SOL and you don't actually stake it, inflation should eat into the value of your SOL. And so there's a very large monetary incentive to stake that SOL, in addition to just all the additional things that you can do on top of it if you do liquid staking or whatnot. And so I think you'll see more people be more involved as time goes on and these projects kind of mature a little bit more.
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah, like from the supply side, as you also pointed out, like if you have the SOL or like any like proof of stake based asset, it just makes sense for you to stake and to take an active part in the network. But like, so be it like a fund, be it an institution, be it a retail investor, but like looking from the supply side, I was wondering, who do you think should run the validator, or maybe also more interestingly, who do you think should not run a validator? Who should basically, who should stay out of this business? Maybe Konstantin, you have a good perspective on that.
Yeah, obviously, because we sit often, I think, wrongly on the side where people feel we bring centralization to a network just because we obviously provide white label tooling for entities to operate nodes. So the question is what happens if our tooling, for example, would be at fault. The way we think of it and the way we approach the subject is that decentralization and who should operate nodes changes over time. It's really correlated to the life cycle of a project. Very early on, I think it's important to have quality validators by people who know how to operate really complex infrastructure in a decentralized manner to ensure that the network can actually scale responsibly and efficiently. When there's dialogue around, oh, how many validators, for example, can control a network, it doesn't really matter if it's 15 or 50, as long as it's it's not somebody controlling 1/3 of the voting power. And most of the network stalls that we've seen across protocols have been a factor. I've never seen a major network go down because of because of an attack or not enough validators validating on a network. But we've seen networks go down because nodes had too many outdated software clients operate on nodes. So the highest risk for decentralized networks early on is not well-run nodes. And so we think that people have a responsibility, and we'd like to provide them with the tools to make that easy, right? Like, so what are the monitoring plugins? How can you ensure that you actually can deploy software seamlessly onto nodes and then share the best practices also with the community? But I definitely feel, but there needs to be variety, right? So there's companies like us, and then there's individuals who need to be able to run nodes, and we'd love to, obviously, we only thrive when a protocol and a decentralized network is fully functional and decentral. And so we're hugely concerned with educating validators and specifically institutions.
100%. I mean, a lot of what we do at the foundation is really just education for new validators joining the blockchain or validators that have been on the blockchain for a very long time of how do you actually run a quality node? How do you help develop the ecosystem? And a large part of what we do is, partnering with really great validators that are already on the network to try to develop, whatever educational resources we can, whatever tooling to help validators learn how to run a good node. And I think it's totally fair to say, yeah, if there are, a subset of validators that are super high quality, that is in some ways more secure than having a lot of validators that are running on outdated clients or not actually up to date on how to respond if there is some kind of an issue. And so, we see ourselves as really like trying to educate the community as much as possible to try to run high quality nodes. And it's really cool when you have validators in the community that take on that mission and kind of just become stewards of what it means to be a really quality validator that is trying to support decentralization and holds other validators to the same standards. So something that has been incredible to see in our community is, Dan and I don't actually have to always be active in the Discord telling new validators, hey, get out of this data center. We've preached enough that the community kind of takes it on, and they are teaching themselves and saying, hey, you need to think about geographic distribution. It's not just data centers. It's also ASNs. It's, different government bodies. It's really thinking in the mindset of like full decentralization. It's software clients. So it's been really cool when you see a community kind of just take on that mission itself, because then you know it's actually sustainable. We don't always have to be there to say that. And I think that's when we know we've actually really been successful, is when validators such as yourself and everyone else can kind of continue that mission on themselves.
I could maybe to jump in there. We were actually having a pretty interesting conversation yesterday with Ella along stake pools, and I'd actually really be interested in what your take on stake pools was, because when we first had heard about stake pools being opened up, I think Ella had and Dom had introduced it. Like I kind of panicked, and then was figuring out like where we stood as validators within these stake pools that kind of operate on a layer above us. Because as you had been mentioning, right, we as validators had been seeing ourselves as very connected to our delegator community, kind of as delegators should be, in my opinion, be holding our validators accountable if there is that sort of on-chain governance exposed on the multiple networks that we operate. But I think from your perspective as operating a lot of these data centers and white labeling, I guess there is like a different factions of validators or service providers or even infrastructure service providers that we're doing. So I mean, maybe my opinion or my reaction was quite extreme, but I mean, I as another operator in the space would be interested to see what you thought of the stake pools themselves. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a great initiative. We don't really have a particular opinion on them, as long as it leads to delegations to high quality nodes. I think the way we look at it is from a strategic perspective, we're really interested how we can bring networks, and I'm just giving examples like a PayPal or a Revolut or a Robinhood or large institutions onto and their user base into this world safely. And the requirements that creates on us are very often fairly stringent on a regulatory side, which means their tokens they operate can't be pooled with any other tokens. Every token that comes from an institution needs to live in a fenced-off pool where every other token can be KYC'd, for example. And so we're spending a lot of time trying to figure out how to create, for example, sort of CeFi pools for institutions, and so that they can safely also participate and delegate, ideally to different validators, not just ours, but then these validators also need to agree to certain rules that are driven around security, redundancy, and then also regulatory frameworks. And unfortunately, regulation is so complicated in our space because we simply don't get any clear guidance, right? And so in the US, it's just really unclear how that should be done. And so it prevents some large institutions to actively engage unless you can provide a super secure, everything is KYC'd, every token can be traced back to its origination type of pooling and staking service. And so we're spending a lot of time thinking about how to build the pools that allow those participants to come in and play with them. But overall, I think as long as it leads to a quality network, we're very happy about it. I just would hope that the pools aren't based, don't get taken over by politics and all that stuff that then limits where they stake and go. And so, like everything else, it needs a lot of divergent opinions, and ideally, a lot of different pools can live adjacent to each other.
Yeah, I mean, stake pools in the form we see them today are incredible for decentralization, but it really is just one solution, right? Like you can stake to a validator, you can stake to the stake pools that exist today. I mean, if you're a developer out there, or you're a product person, what are all the other ways that you can stake and create liquid tokens by staking to an individual validator or by staking to a pool without issuing a token? What is the value of that? I mean, these are all, this is a very green field, I think, and we're just seeing the very beginning of what could be done. But I mean, especially for institutional investors, the solutions that they will need are going to look very different. And so I think there's a lot of room. And if anyone is interested, I highly recommend, look into the space, reach out to us if you have questions or ideas. We're very open and interested. I think all of us have the same mission, which is, let's decentralize as much as possible and increase censorship resistance. How we get there is, it's honestly a question of just product innovation and technical limitation, but I think we could get there if we try.
Yeah, and maybe one last thing also, for example, so we need to ensure our validators against slashing in order to have our institutional parties to participate, for example. And so, like it requires certain admin things on their part too, where there can't be any risk to principal that they make available for legal reasons, for example. And so when you pick validators, for example, there's a lot of different factors you can look for and how to manage and mitigate risk. But yeah, the underlying infrastructure around security is also constantly in evolution.
Okay, yeah, I think it was a great discussion. We encourage everyone to just interact actively with the network, right? Be it a fund, be it like any sort of entity you are. Just dig yourself into these networks and take part in governance. Talk with the awesome validators, and yeah, let's make this space more decentralized.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. And go stake your soul.